So it's been 3 months since I created this little shrimp jar and I wanted to publish an update video on its progress. I linked to the setup video in the card and description, but in short, this is a Walstad method shrimp jar that uses cheap topsoil and gravel for the substrate, with plants acting as the water purifiers. So jumping in with the shrimp, and I have lost one of the shrimp that I put in here, but I am guessing it was due to natural causes because all of the other shrimp in here seem fine. These are yellow Neocaridina that I bred myself in my 12-gallon tank, so I have no idea how old any of these shrimp are, and they usually only live between 1 and 2 years anyway, so it could have just been one of those things. I've seen at least 3 baby shrimp in this jar now, and there's also at least 1 berried female in here with eggs, so I am expecting more baby shrimp soon. Overpopulation can be a risk with these small shrimp jars, but I'll just move the excess shrimp over to my main yellow Neocaridina breeding tank to avoid any potential problems. In theory, this should allow me to keep between 5 and 8 shrimp in this jar and allow them to breed without issue for the future. I was a little worried about getting the GH levels right in this jar due to the smaller water volume, but the shrimp in here have all been molten without issue for months now, so I think it's spot on. Overall, I am happy with how the shrimp are coming along, and it's great to have babies in the tank already, as well as another pregnant female who's ready to drop. Moving on to water quality, and it's actually been far easier to maintain most of the water parameters in this jar than I thought. This is a Walstad method shrimp jar, meaning that the plants are used to naturally filter the water and they can easily manage the bioload of a couple of Neocaridina shrimp. I try to test the ammonia, nitrite and nitrate levels of the jar every week, and all 3 come back at 0 ppm. I actually think that the lack of ammonium and nitrate in the jar may be causing some issues with the plants, but more on that later. The pH, GH and KH have all fluctuated a little bit due to water evaporation, water top-ups and partial water changes, but the shrimp don't seem to mind too much. I aim for a pH between 7.0 and 8.0, a KH of between 3 and 10 and a GH of between 6 and 10. And I have been getting slightly different readings that are thankfully all within these ranges when testing the water parameters. Provided you let these fluctuations take place over an extended period of time and things generally stay stable for the shrimp, it doesn't seem to cause many issues. There is a slight spike in GH and KH after a partial water change in the tank, but my shrimp do freak out a little bit, but they quickly go back to normal. I have removed the heater from the jar as my Neocaridina shrimp should be fine at room temperature with this setup, and it's summertime here in the UK right now, so the temperatures are easily within their recommended ranges. If I do have any problems during the winter months, then I'll simply re-add the heater and turn it on to maintain a consistent temperature. So moving on to feeding and diet, and this shrimp jar has been very easy to feed. Neocaridina constantly graze on microscopic algae and biofilm in their habitat, and there's plenty of both in this jar. That said, I do still like to target feed the jar 3 times per week, usually on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays. This means I'll manually add some type of food source, usually some type of higher protein food, to the jar on those days for the shrimp to eat. I have tried a few different foods in this jar, but I think the best options for such a small setup are fluval bug bites, Hikari microalgae wafers and bloodworm. A single fluval bug bite bottom feeder granule or a quarter of a Hikari microalgae wafer seems to be the perfect portion size for this particular colony. Just like my other shrimp, these little guys absolutely love both of these foods, and they manage to eat them both within a couple of hours on feeding days. I have tried bloodworm as a treat food a couple of times, but since I have so few shrimp in here, it does usually take them 2 or even 3 days to finish one bloodworm. This is why more recently I have just been sticking with the fluval bug bites and the Hikari microalgae wafers, as they just seem to be able to eat them a lot quicker. I know that some people do leave their Neocaridina shrimp to just feed on the algae and biofilm in their tank, and that can work, but personally I do find that my shrimp will breed more if I manually add some type of higher protein food to their habitat. So moving on to plant and algae growth, and in all honesty neither have really been as bad as I initially expected. The Salvinia floating plant does need maintenance every week, but I just remove 2 fistfuls of the plant and then leave the rest in there. I do think that the Rotala rotundifolia in this jar may be having some problems with nutrition, as it's not grown anywhere near as fast as the same plant in my other aquariums. Now the topsoil in this setup is rich in essential trace elements, but it can lack nitrogen, carbon, potassium and phosphorus. I usually overcome these issues in my larger tanks by simply adding more fish food for my fish or shrimp to eat, but due to this being such a small jar, this can be a little risky. Neocaridina shrimp really don't eat that much, so any excess leftover food may start to cause ammonia and nitrite spikes in the jar that may harm the shrimp. Due to this, I'm thinking that the best options will be either to remove the salvinia so the rotala gets the bulk of the nutrients in here, or start dosing a liquid fertilizer. I don't usually use liquid fertilizers on my Walstad tanks, as with my normal setups it's just not needed, but with this being a unique, far smaller than normal setup, it might be something that I've got to play with. The Christmas moss is grown, but it's grown far slower than it does in my other tanks. I don't actually think that the Christmas moss's slow growth rate is due to a nutrient issue. I think it's probably something to do with the power of the light that I'm using on this jar. I'm using a small low powered Hygge light and it is doing the job. Everything is grown, and to be honest, with it being such a small shrimp colony, I really don't need that much moss in here anyway, so I am happy with how it's performing. You may be able to see algae starting to form on the glass in some of these video clips, and that's only been an issue for 2 or 3 weeks. Keeping the glass clean in such a small container that has circular glass is a bit of a pain, so I decided to add a single horned neurite snail to the jar. Horned neurite snails are usually around 1/3 of the size of most other types of neurite snail in the hobby, making them perfect for such a small container. Neurite snails are great at eating algae and biofilm on tank glass, but they do choose random paths when moving, so it will take a while before there's any real noticeable dent in the amount of algae on the glass. So moving on to maintenance for the jar, and this has been a very low maintenance shrimp jar that I'm very happy with. As mentioned earlier, I only target feed this jar 3 times per week, and it only takes a couple of seconds each time. The excess salvinia does need removing once per week, but I'd be surprised if that takes more than 30 seconds to complete. I've only had to trim the rotala rotundifolia twice in 3 months in this jar because of its slow growth rate, so that really doesn't take up much time at all. Water top-ups and partial water changes do take up more time, but that's mainly due to me having soft water out of my tap. I like to add some sort of shrimp salt product to my tap water to increase its GH level, so the mineral content in there is within the ranges required for Neocaridina shrimp to molt safely. If you live in an area with hard water out of your tap, this may not be required for your shrimp jar, so it might not be anything you have to worry about. Thankfully, I have multiple shrimp tanks, so this makes it a little easier for me to do my water changes and water top-ups. I know that a single scoop of this shrimp salt in this particular sized bucket with the water parameters right out of my tap will easily bring the GH level up towards the upper recommended range for Neocaridina shrimp. That means that I just fill this bucket with water, add the single scoop, and then I do the partial water change or water top up to the jar as required, and then use the rest of the water in the buckets for my shrimp tanks, keeping things quick and easy. As I mentioned earlier, the shrimp have started to breed, so another type of maintenance that I'm going to have to do is netting some of the baby shrimp up and moving them over to my main breeding tank to avoid any overpopulation issues. I haven't actually done this yet, but I don't think it'll be much of an issue as I have this small shrimp net that will easily fit into the jar. If needed, I can bait the net with some kind of food as well, and in most cases Neocaridina shrimp will just walk into the net to get the food, letting you quickly and easily get them out. I'm really happy with how this jar is progressing, and I want to leave it for at least 12 months in its current state, but I would like to rescape it at least once a year just to try out new things and document them here on YouTube. Anyway guys, that brings the video to an end. Hopefully it was helpful. Thanks for watching and have a good day.